Hello Internet, Daniel here, and I love Star Wars. And Star Wars Month is finally here. My gosh, we've been waiting for this for, a good 3 months now that we've been planning this out, and it's finally here. I'm excited.
Mm-hmm. And this is Eric, and Hollywood ruins everything. Even Star Wars sometimes, unfortunately.
We are going to have to talk about that now, aren't we?
Yes, we are.
Oh, man. Yeah, this month will be a lot of fun, but it'll be a little bit depressing at some points, too. So, yeah, definitely. So, I thought to start off this kind of celebratory, unscripted video here, we just kind of talk about, obviously, who we are, why we got into Star Wars, what our Star Wars background is, both with the movies and expanded universe, where applicable. I know you're really just recently getting into it. I mean, I got into it pretty recently, too, but you're, like, just on the front of it. So.
Right. Sounds good. Why don't you start since...
Yeah, well, I actually had a bit of a weird entry into the Star Wars franchise. It wasn't until 2005, Revenge of the Sith came out in theaters. That was my earliest memory of Star Wars, believe it or not, going to the theaters with some of my friends and watching that movie. And in 2005, when I was like 10, I enjoyed the movie. I did, going to the theaters, and it was fun. We got some Star Wars toys afterwards, so me and my friend were dueling each other, So it was a really an odd entry, but a good entry, and it really kind of kicked off a lot of great things. And of course, with the expanded universe, I was aware that there was something out there, because obviously I'd played a couple of the games and whatnot, but.
Force Unleashed.
Yeah, Force Unleashed I've been kind of working my way into. My first big game that I actually went and completed was, again, another weird entryway into the genre, was Knights of the Old Republic 2. I actually had 2 before I played 1. I'm still working my way through 1. So, yeah, it was on sale at the Pawn America in town, and I saw it and I was like, I've heard a lot of Star Wars games are good. I've heard good things about the Knights of the Old Republic, so let's give this a shot. And I did, and my gosh, was it great. So I started, right after that, I started looking for the first one, and just recently found it, and have just started making my way through that. So,
right.
Yeah. So that was kind of interesting, and it wasn't until Disney basically made the old EU Legends that I was like, oh my gosh, there is a lot of stuff here, that I really need to dig into. So I've been slowly working my way through the books. Mainly the Old Republic stuff is what I've been working on to get started, because that was the era I was introduced into. And, just kind of working my way through that, slowly but surely.
My first experiences with Star Wars were, my dad would have us watch 4, 5, and 6, like a couple of times a year and stuff like that. But I didn't really get too interested. It was just kind of this thing that was always a story that I've always known because he would play it since birth.
So a much more natural entryway into Star Wars.
He was quite enthused about it and would point out little things here and there, and try to get me more invested in the story. Around episode 3... I don't believe I watched episode 1, but I watched episode 2, and in my mind, as a kid, you don't really get into the whole, the prequels are terrible thing.
Yeah.
And then episode 3, I was really excited about it, bought the novelization, and was kind of like comparing it against episode 3 while we were watching it.
Yeah.
In some ways, novelization was better, but...
Well, it is usually how it goes, they say. You're a lot more bookish than me, too, so I haven't read any of the episode novelizations. I've heard good things about some of them, but I haven't actually read any of them yet, so...
I believe with the enthusiasm, though, that I went out of episode 3 with, because I actually liked the movie as a kid at the time. I don't remember how old I was. I bought a couple of... I believe they were called the Jedi Apprentice books.
Oh, yep.
Stuff set slightly after episode 3, following someone who was an apprentice but left the Jedi Order.
Oh, is there another series by that title? Because I think there was a Jedi Apprentice series that followed like Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon back in the day.
It's been a really long time, and I don't think I have those books anymore, so I might be misremembering them. I really should look it up because they really were kind of interesting books.
Yeah. Interesting.
over time, I've occasionally visited Wikipedia and looked through the articles and stuff like that. There's so...
Don't admit that! Don't admit that!
There's so much content that I think I've always kind of been intimidated out of actually looking into the universe a bit more.
Yeah, I can
more
get
deeply.
that. I haven't heard too many people say that, but I get that. It's just like when you discover a new show and you watch a couple episodes and you really like it, but then you realize it has 9 seasons. And you're like, I don't know.
This is such a big expense on my time, and you think short-sightedly, hey, maybe there's better things I could do with it. But I've been kind of getting more and more into it recently. This week I read The Tenebrous Way, and
Yeah, that was quite an experience. Maybe not the...
it wasn't
best
really
book
the
that-
greatest book,
Yeah.
or the greatest short story, rather, not book.
Right.
Greatest short story, but I liked it well enough, and it kind of interested me in it a bit more. So I might look a bit more deeply into the legends from here on forward.
Right. Yeah, Tenebrous, and he'll be coming back up again here later in the video. Because that was quite an experience. That really, yeah. All right, but with that out of the way, our first topic is to rank all the movies. You, of course, have not quite seen one of them. You will be reviewing it this month, though. So
Right.
Yeah, but I'll start it off then, going from 10 to 1. My number 10 movie is, unfortunately, the one you're going to have to be reviewing this month, is the Clone Wars animated film. It was very kind of childish to me, I thought, for the most part, just because I couldn't get behind the plot. I could not get behind the plot. And as a result of the plot and the writing, some of the new characters like Ahsoka just kind of rubbed me the wrong way. Thankfully, she was much, much better in the TV series. And I don't know about Rebels yet. I haven't gotten to the point where she shows up in Rebels, so I can't speak to that. But I really liked her in the Clone Wars TV series a lot better than I did in the movie, and the movie just did not work for me. And one thing that's going to kind of come up here as I'm talking about my rankings for these films is when I'm looking at ranking movies inside the same franchise against each other, a lot of them are so close that it comes down to really the way I kind of decide is... When I look at it, I describe bad as the absence of good in these films. And I still kind of struggle to find a whole heck of a lot of good in that movie. And as a result, it plummeted to
You're-
10 spot.
You're really not making it easier to review it.
Yeah, I didn't get into too many specifics,
Even the prequels, at one point, I actually saw them as good because I was a kid, and so I can remember having some nice feelings toward it at one point.
I suppose if you were still a kid, you might be able to pull that off. I don't know. We'd have to ask a lot of kids.
What do you think about Revenge of the Sith? I like it. Lightsabers and fights. And
Hey, it looked great. The fights were, to a kid, pretty good. And of course, we'll talk about that more. So,
Yeah.
But your number...
My number 10 by default would have to be the same film. I will be looking at it later and giving my actual perspective on it when I've actually seen it. But for the time
now.
being,
Yeah, for now.
why don't we go back to you then for the next one?
Okay, I got it. Wow, my phone is not showing up in this room. Okay, so my number 9 is Rogue One. And I have seen a lot of people actually rank Rogue One in at least their top half, some of them even top 3. So this is, based on what I've seen online, this may be kind of a controversial opinion, but it's my number 9. Honestly, again, bad being the absence of good. I could not get behind the characters. I couldn't remember half of their names as I was watching the film. And again, I know it went through a lot of reshoots and whatnot. I haven't looked too far into it. That's probably a big part of the reason why the plot was, what it was. But it just, to me, I couldn't get behind the characters. I couldn't really get behind the plot. It still had that, every Star Wars movie seems to have that one scene where it's just like, why was this in here? Shouldn't this have hit the cutting room floor at some point? But
Yeah.
With all that, it was just really hard to get behind, in my opinion. And honestly, the only reason that it probably isn't number 10 is because that Darth Vader scene at the end. Again,
Yes,
if,
exactly.
if bad is the absence of good, it did have more than the animated Clone Wars movie simply because that scene was great.
Yes. Very few scenes can beat Darth Vader going to town on Rebels.
Yes.
Alright then, my number 9 and my number 8, because, well, they're the Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones. It was way too hard to actually decide which one actually got the better and which one got the worse, because the Phantom Menace is, in a lot of ways, better scripted and more cohesive and easier to follow, but the Attack of the Clones, I actually liked bits of it, like Anakin and Obi-Wan's relationship when they weren't complaining at each other.
Which admittedly was very brief, but yes.
During the chase scene, we actually got to see flashes of this. It wasn't just 30 seconds in an elevator that they had.
Right.
There actually was a relationship there, and I wish they had gone more with it. And there were some other parts that I actually found humorous. Episode 2 had humanity in the way that Episode 1 didn't, but Episode 2 also had a ridiculously convoluted, incomprehensible plot.
And then, of course, that romance.
You say bad is the absence of good, but in this case, I think bad is an actual negative feature that takes away from the good in this case.
Right. There is cringe and whatnot that you do have to factor into these sort of things. But again, that's just how I, especially when I'm ranking things inside the same franchise and trying to figure out, like with Phantom Menace and the Clone Wars, Attack of the Clones, two very different things. Trying to figure out which one to rank where, it really does to me. I have to default to that because they are so close. And I actually had those as my 7 and 8.
Okay.
I had Phantom Menace at 8. I had Attack of the Clones at 7. I do, just like you said, kind of go back and forth between them, but that's what I land on for this list. I think that it's because, again, bad being the absence of good in my rankings. Episode 1 did have a lot of flashes of good things, I think. Darth Maul was good.
Right.
There was some stuff with Sidious. It was more in the background, but it was still all right.
Right.
The pod race scene, but it was still cool. Especially as a kid when I saw it, I still thoroughly enjoyed it. So, there were flashes of good. Not great, but good.
Right.
In that film. And there was in Attack of the Clones as well, but to me, not quite as much. And I think that the bad, if we are going to go with that as an actual thing, the bad was probably a little worse in Attack of the Clones, in my opinion. So there was some good stuff that the editing kind of undercut a little bit, like Anakin's build-up as he's going to the Sand People to try and save his mother. The build for that was good. You really kind of started getting behind that, and then, of course, the editing kind of...
Music rising, scene cut!
Right, to something completely different, and then when you come back to that Anakin scene, it's a completely different tone, a completely different feel. So, even the good stuff in Attack of the Clones kind of undercut itself, in part because of the editing, in my opinion, so that's...
Tone jumped from, dangerous Geonosian thing where people have the potential to die to romance on Naboo and rolling in the grass.
Yes, I think I actually misspoke. I think I said I had Attack of the Clones above Phantom Menace there at the start.
Oh, yeah.
Reverse order. Yeah, Phantom Menace above Attack of the Clones by the narrowest of margins because of what I just said, so, yeah.
Alright, I can see that. It's still more of a time in my mind. Anyways, how about you go on to your number 8? Oh, wait,
I'm up to 6. Yeah, you gotta go with your...
My number 7.
Yes.
Okay. It would be Rogue One.
Okay.
In a lot of ways, it's as bad as the prequels, boring characters, the convoluted plot issue that was in Episode 2 and all that. But I do think it had... if you've seen the Trope Talk episode on Rule of Cool, I think it had just enough awesome for me to kind of jump ahead of it and keep my attention for periods of time. Meanwhile, Phantom Menace, I was bored all the way through, and Attack of the Clones, I was also bored most of the way through, plus I had a headache on top of that, so...
Yeah, I can see that. The third act of Rogue One was very exciting, or at least it would have been had I cared at all. So that was the thing with me, is because of the characters and whatnot, I was kind of checked out by the time it got to the good stuff. Had I made it to the good stuff and was still engaged, I think it would have easily jumped ahead of the prequels. But
yeah, when I'm watching a movie, it's less about me remembering all the stuff that's gone on beforehand, unless it suddenly relates to the present, and more me just kind of being in the moment whenever that moment happens to be. So
see, when I'm reviewing, we obviously have very different ways of reviewing, but when I'm in it, it's almost like a point system. You know, I start off in the positives, and it takes quite a few dings to get me down into the negatives to the point where I just don't care. I try and give the movie the benefit of the doubt as best I can. But once I get into that negative zone, it's very hard to pull back. So, I mean, I was basically like completely out of it, and like I just why, you know, for most of Rogue One, and then the Darth Vader scene was enough to pull me back right at the end. But of course, it was over. So,
of course, Rogue One also had the fan service issues that the prequels had of trying to throw in C-3PO and R2-D2 show up at the end of the scene for no reason other than, hey, they're in every film.
Which, I mean, is nice, but again, it didn't really serve too much of a purpose, so...
It's gotten to the point where fan service becomes obnoxious simply by its over-presence. If you notice it overly much, it's like, hey, that's not something cool. That's blatant fan service right there.
Again, and that's the point system that I was talking about. You get enough dings and you start really thinking about this stuff, and you're no longer really in the moment watching the film.
Right.
And at that point, it's very hard to get back in, at least for me, you know, so...
Right.
Yeah. So that moves me on to number 6 then, right? So number 6, Revenge of the Sith for me. Mm-hmm. It's the best of the prequels, though none of it really stands out to the level that, say, Luke and Rey's training scenes in Episode 8 did for me. So that's kind of why I have it below that, is both of them had their flashes of good, but also their flashes of But the flashes of good in Last Jedi I liked a little bit more than the flashes of good in Sith.
Right.
So that's why that kind of falls where that does for me.
And for number 6, for me, also Revenge of the Sith.
Okay.
I don't actually hate this movie in quite the same way as I do the other prequels and for a lot of Rogue One. It suffers because it's related to 1 and 2, and 1 and 2 set up a lot of stuff that was in 3, and it has some of the same mechanical plot direction issues that plague the whole prequel trilogy. Mm-hmm. But there was something about Anakin's turn to the dark side that was actually really intriguing and appealing to me. I don't entirely understand it, even after thinking about it quite a lot. I still don't get quite why I liked it as much as I did, but it does put it above all of the movies below it, at the very least.
Interesting. That's the toughest thing for a reviewer, I think, is you're feeling something, but you can't quite tell exactly why. You know, that's...
Right, which is why people like Plinkett and whatever, that a lot of people had bad feelings about the prequels, but when someone actually explained it, everyone goes whole hog and just repeats those explanations everywhere, even if they're not quite what they're feeling. They're close enough and they can explain it enough that people like to jump on that.
Yeah, I mean, the Plinkett reviews were very, very good. They were very well thought out, and they were very entertaining, no doubt about that. But for me personally, I don't think the prequels were quite as bad as they were made out to be there. They're not fantastic pieces of film or art by any stretch. But I don't think they're quite as bad as people on the internet appear to want you to think. So,
rewatching it the other day, you know, to get prepared for it this month.
Right.
It didn't strike me as nearly as bad as I had thought they were.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, yeah.
We'll probably have to review them at some point to kind of point out why we think what we think on the prequels, why they're not, I mean, well, they're not great,
They're
not
not
even good, but they're not as bad as one would believe.
They are not complete and absolute irredeemable trash.
Yeah, there are good
But-
things mixed in there. Just like a lot
Yeah.
of movies. They're, as I was saying to you before recording this, they're passable. There's some things that are very hard to get over, but if you can, and I understand why a lot of people can't, they are passable. Which is sort of an epidemic in and of itself with Hollywood that we may have to go into at some point, but still, you know.
It's sad that they are passable because they're connected to Star Wars, but
And Star Wars deserves better, but yes. Bit of
I
a
suppose.
bit of a slight overreaction.
all right.
So
How about we move on to your number 5?
okay, boy, I am probably going to get a lot of heat for putting this one in the top half. Okay, so I'm just going to read straight from my notes here because I don't want to forget anything.
Right.
So, what you have to understand about how I put my personal rankings, again, together, bad is the absence of good. The Last Jedi had a lot of good, in my opinion, in things like their performances, particularly Mark Hamill as Luke, I liked. Yes, despite the ending, I agree that kind of rubbed me a little bit the wrong way too, but despite the ending, I think his performance was solid. Adam Driver as Kylo Ren, especially at the end, I loved him kind of going out of control. I mean, one of the things that I'm not the greatest judge of actors. In fact, out of critics, I'm probably one of the worst judges of actors out there. It's not my forte. I'm much better with writing and with plotting than I am with characters and acting. But the thing for me with actors, the way that I try and figure out who's doing a good job acting and who isn't, is which actor can make me, on their own, without great writing or anything like that, make me feel something. And Adam Driver, especially at the end, really made me feel something. I could really get into his performance. I mean, you know, him just yelling, "I want you to blast that ship out of the sky!" You know, that was great, how he was just so over the edge. So I think we got cut off there a little bit, but I believe I just talked about how I liked Adam Driver's performance as Kylo Ren in this movie, especially at the end, you know, how he was delivering those lines at the end. I could really get behind him. And as far as other things that I liked about the film, Luke's reveal, I thought was very, very good. Like I said, I'm still unsure about how I feel about his death at the end. I'm trying my best to have a wait and see for episode 9, trying to give the movie the benefit of the doubt, even though I probably shouldn't at this point. It's pretty clear that Disney did not have a true, well thought out plan for the trilogy as a whole. But who knows? Writers are generally pretty good. They're very creative. Maybe they come up with something that, even though it wasn't pre-planned, it still works and they can fit it in. I don't know. I'm waiting and seeing. So, but the reveal that he was force projecting himself and tricking Kylo Ren so that the rebels could escape and whatnot. It wasn't Grandmaster Luke from the EU, but it was still awesome. Again, follow-up, maybe not so much. I don't know, but the reveal was awesome. And also, the mysticism factor between Luke and Rey during those training scenes, they were great. I loved it, and I knew I did, because every time they went to anything else, I was like, man, can't we go back to Luke and Rey? That stuff was interesting. So, those were all very, very good things, I thought, in the film.
Coincidentally,
that's why I was reading the notes before. I did miss some stuff. So, yeah, were there a lot of problems with that, especially, you know, with the film basically seeming like they're just throwing out what was done in 7 and whatnot?
Yeah.
Were there a lot of problems? Absolutely, yes. I would not deny that at all. But, again, there was also a fair bit of good, and based on how I rank my films, bad is the absence of good. There was a lot of bad, but there was a lot of good, too.
Right. Now, coincidentally, I also have Last Jedi in 5th place.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, I'm not the only one then.
I was actually looking into The Last Jedi and people making reviews and trying to figure out where all the hate was coming from and people explaining their point of view. There's a lot of conflicting opinions, even on the same sides of the issues, where people dislike it, but they dislike it for a lot of different reasons, and they're like, oh, you disliked it for that reason? Well, that wasn't actually bad, and stuff like that.
Yeah, well, art is very subjective in all cases. Even on some of our little reviews, we've had people point out the things you were pointing out as problems weren't actually problems, but it's art. It's all subjective, I'm glad that others can enjoy stuff that I can't, and I can enjoy stuff that others can't. So
yeah, I would agree with that. But with The Last Jedi, I saw what it tried to do. I saw its themes and its arcs, and it would frankly be a lot higher on this list, and probably not as controversial as it is, if it was just executed properly.
Yeah.
Yeah, the script needs rewriting. Canto Bight doesn't necessarily need to be there, but the things that it was trying to get across with that particular script weren't actually that bad. And you can see a lot of this, especially with the Luke and Rey scenes, which I think were actually pretty well done. I just don't think it would necessarily be bad if it had been reworked properly. But even if it's a below-average Star Wars films, it brings enough good to the table that I would place it above, the prequels and all those other ones. That's why it's here pretty much smack dab in the middle, instead of somewhere even lower.
Right. Okay. All right, that brings me to number 4, which, for me, I get so much hate for this list, is Return of the Jedi.
What? Really?
Yes, Return of the Jedi is my number 4. And I know there's going to be a lot of disagreements in the comments over this, so again, I'm going to go straight from my notes here. Return of the Jedi's climax always felt a little bit lackluster to me. I never felt like there was a whole lot to legitimately tempt Luke to the dark side, so Sidious and it just didn't really fly too well for me. It kind of was distracting. I did enjoy Hamill's performance, especially in the climax. Again, really kind of make me feel something. But again, it's just the pull to the dark side. I didn't really feel it. It wasn't really there, in my opinion. So, yeah, but after Empire, that may have had something to do with it as well, that I had seen it right after watching Empire. So, It was good, but it wasn't enough to save it from being number 4 on this list for me. And then, of course, Ewoks. So, I know that there are people split on that as well, but, that also didn't really fly for me. It was a little childish, again, similar to some of the other films that are lower on this list. It dropped out of the top 3 for me, ever so slightly behind my number 3.
All right. I can see where you're coming from. I'll get into talking a bit more about it when we reach my list, because that wasn't my number 4.
Yeah, not surprised.
My number 4 actually was A New Hope.
Oh, okay. That does surprise me a little.
The thing is, it's not a problem with A New Hope. Okay. It's a problem with me. Okay. I have seen the hero's journey archetype way too many times. I've seen way too many farm boys. The culture that I'm in has immersed me in too much of that stuff, and on top of all that, I've seen the movie way too many times, having seen it again and again since childhood, to the point where it just doesn't excite me in the same way that I see other people getting excited about it. I don't cheer on Luke as he drops bombs into the Death Star. It just...
I can get that. I mean, your family, obviously we don't really talk about our personal stuff too much on this, but your family is very, very well read.
Right.
And you read pretty much constantly, so I can understand you kind of running into this type of story a lot, and it just not having quite as much of an impact on you as it would have maybe the first time had you been introduced to it first here. So,
I mean, there's great things in it, don't get me wrong. The characters are great, quite a few things. It's flawlessly executed. It's just not really my thing. I'm rather neutral about it.
Yeah, the impact isn't quite there. Yeah. And I can understand that. I was a little surprised when you said it, but I can understand it based on that explanation and where you come from. So,
right.
Yeah. Okay, so that brings me to My number 3, which will probably get me even more hate based on how I put this above Return of the Jedi, but my number 3 is The Force Awakens. So, is it derivative? Certainly. No doubt about it. Was it basically a rehash of episodes 4 and maybe a little bit of 5 sprinkled in there? And was that really needed? For me, no. I would have rather them just made a good new Star Wars film, because there are a lot of great Star Wars stories, especially in the EU, that they could have pulled inspiration from. But from a business perspective, I can understand why they thought they needed to go that way. So, I guess I get it, even if I'm not a huge fan of that. And did The Last Jedi retroactively take a little bit away from this film? Yeah, probably. At least, again, as of this recording, we haven't seen 9 yet, so I'm still trying to hold out hope.
Yeah.
But if you can get past that, and again, I can understand why a lot of people haven't been able to, and I'm only barely getting past it. But if you can, I think it was still a fairly well-executed film, similar to A New Hope, even if the characters maybe weren't quite as good. They were still good.
Well, I'm going to get far more hate because I put this above A New Hope as opposed to Return of the Jedi. But my number 3 is also The Force Awakens.
Okay, before you smash the dislike button. No. Okay, so why did you come down on that?
Well, Episode 4, like I said, it didn't impact me quite the same way. Episode 7, while it is derivative, and I recognize it, and it's not perfectly executed, it plays with similar tropes and themes a lot more, and it has kind of that nostalgic familiarity, Han Solo walking onto the Millennium Falcon.
He nailed it in that film.
Yes.
My goodness. I was a little worried when I saw the trailers for it, that they were just going to have him be kind of a nostalgic trip or whatever like that. He wasn't going to do a whole lot, but as soon as I was watching the film, I'm like, yeah,
right.
He's still got it.
Right. It does. It's not a perfect film, and it's not perfectly executed like Episode 4, but because of my feelings towards Episode 4, that's why Episode 7 is here.
Okay. Yeah. Interesting. I'm surprised that we, especially with all the hate that Episode 7 got, even though it wasn't quite as much as Episode 8, I'm surprised that we both actually have it as a top 3. That is interesting.
All right.
So, okay. Number 2 is, for me, A New Hope. Basically, for all the reasons that you said, it's very well executed. It has great characters. I'm not nearly as well read as you, so it did have an impact on me much more than it would have for you, since you've seen that story, or at least a similar story, so many times. I haven't. This was my introduction to that story. So, yeah. New Hope, number 2, for basically all the reasons that you already listed.
Okay. Return of the Jedi would be my number 2.
Oh, yeah?
The Ewoks are not that bad, okay?
It was just a thing for me that yeah. I know some people actually like them. Some people are kind of neutral on them. I kind of disliked them because they pulled me out of it. I was supposed to be, especially when you're cutting from the Emperor's scene back to here, you're going from kind of a tonal whiplash type of deal, from something very, very serious and down to earth and whatnot, the redemption of a man, the possible death of our hero that we followed for 3 films, to the Ewoks. And it just, for me, it was distracting, that's all.
I guess I can see that. For me, the Ewoks were sort of just there, much like, the big worm on the asteroid, and the garbage monster.
Yeah, that's how I felt about Porgs. They were kind of there.
Yeah.
I'm surprised they didn't bother me more, because usually that sort of thing would bother me, but
they're just kind of that Star Wars-y thing that's there, and you can feel one way or the other about it, but it doesn't really do much of anything. A lot of Return of the Jedi I actually felt was similar in tone to Empire, but instead of it being a story of the Empire, shadowing over the rebellion, this time it was actually their victory. Them facing off of Jabba's gang of cutthroats as a whole group, with all of them with their various skills and what they were doing,
And Han, for all intents and purposes, even though this was taken out in the EU, basically killing Boba Fett while he was blind. Oh, Boba Fett. Yeah.
Oh.
Poor Boba. Yeah.
No, but everything coming together and kind of winning out over darkness in the very end, I rather liked that. You might say that the Death Star 2.0 was kind of lazy, maybe, but they executed that a lot differently than they did Episode 4's Death Star. In this case, it was the finale, the climax of the battle between the Rebellion and the Death Star, so things had quite a lot more weight. You might say that there was nothing to tempt Luke with, and in a certain way, you're right, but from my perspective, especially with Episode 8 cementing kind of my understanding of Luke as more than just kind of this guy who sometimes was down on himself and things like that, Luke was never really the best Jedi. Especially if you take the prequels into context. He was always impulsive, emotional. He presented himself as Jedi Master Luke, but even Yoda was like, no, you're not a master yet. You need to defeat Darth Vader. And the way that Luke defeated Darth Vader wasn't by, coming into himself, finding that inner peace and calm, and, becoming one with the Force. It was to realize that if he kept going down this path of fighting everything, fighting fate and whatnot, he'd end up the same as his father. And so he threw the lightsaber aside. He was hoping, he had a lot of faith in his father, that his father would step in and whatnot, but he also kind of realized that there was darkness in himself.
Oh, I agree. And I saw all that as well, and I do like that. I was more talking about the Emperor trying to tempt him, as opposed to all the symbolism and the setup with Vader.
But when you think about it, the Emperor was not necessarily trying to tempt him with power. He was kind of saying, there's only one way out here, and that's for you to win. So how about we complete this? And Luke may not have necessarily understood it until he fought his father. Wasn't Luke going to try to kill the Empire by pulling his lightsaber to him and attacking at some point?
He was going to kill the Empire.
Right. That was going to happen, and Luke couldn't really see where that would lead until later on in the whole thing. He didn't realize that in itself was the temptation aspect of it. So, on retrospective, with Episode 8 giving me the kind of perspective of Luke that I lacked over time, it didn't really seem to me like there was nothing to tempt Luke with. That wasn't the right context to frame that particular scene in.
Okay. I can see that. And again, I get what you're saying about, the Luke becoming his father thing and that storyline. And that was well done. It was just, to me, similar, I guess, to Snoke and his thing. I expected more. And I think it was the same with the Emperor. He was built up through the first two films and whatnot, and I expected a little more, and I didn't get what I was expecting, so it kind of took me out of it. Not because it was poorly handled, but because it was different from what I was expecting, And I know that can sometimes happen, but it to me was enough to drop it to number 4. But again, we're split between 1, 2, 3, and 4. We're really splitting hairs. They're all, very well done films. So it's all very personal. It's art. So
yeah. Oh, and also the Emperor. The Emperor is awesome. Probably one of the best villains ever. Not necessarily because his plan or anything is complex or he's got this big backstory or character. I mean, he does in Legends and stuff, but because he was as intimidating and powerful and awesome. Not awesome as in cool, but awesome as in it invoked awe.
Okay, see, to me it never did. Maybe that's something I'll have to watch the movie back again and kind of think on. But to me it never did.
Maybe it was just different perceptions.
It may very well be. Like I said, I mean, maybe I'll have to go back and watch it again and do a review and really kind of think it through, as opposed to just kind of watching it as from a viewer's perspective. Watch it from a critic's perspective. and maybe that'll change things, because I've never really watched Return of the Jedi truly with the sole purpose to review it. You know, I've kind of thought about it and I've watched it a few times, but never with the sole intention to analyze. And that does make a difference, I think. You know, because you're coming in with a different frame of mind.
Right.
You're a critic, you're not a viewer.
If I had to rank these based off of what I felt were good films as opposed to what I liked, these would be done a lot differently.
A lot differently. I agree.
Right.
So, but that brings me to my number one, which by process of elimination I think has to be your number one, which is a lot of people's number one, and it's Empire Strikes Back. Do we really need to go into it?
I don't really think we do.
Yeah. So
yeah.
It's Empire. It's number one. I'm sorry. That's just
it wins. All you other people who think differently, you suck.
I wouldn't go that far, but it is very clear cut. Empire is number one.
Right.
Yeah. So
okay. Now that we've gotten through that,
yes.
How about we move on to our next topic, which I believe is kind of asking ourselves, if we were Jedi, you know, what kind of lightsaber design we would have, what kind of color, what kind of form we would use of the, I believe there's 7 Jedi forms?
Yep, unless you count the 3 rings of defense, but we're not counting the 3 rings of defense.
No.
So, yeah, the 7 classical lightsaber forms is what we'll be going off of.
All right.
So, yeah, we'll start with the design of the lightsaber itself.
Right.
And since I've been kind of starting off these lists, I'll let you start this one off.
All right. I was thinking that for my particular lightsaber, I'd like it kind of straight and simple. I'm thinking there might be some sort of hidden weapon attached to it, whether it's a lightsaber beam out of an unexpected angle or whatnot. But I think that the element of surprise would be something I would prefer to use a lot more.
Okay.
I'm not the most athletic person. Even with Jedi training, I don't think I would be the strongest or fastest. So if I had something unexpected to bring to the table that could allow me a victory, I think that would help a lot.
Okay.
I was thinking about a curved one, but the curved one, yeah, it does fit into the hand, and yeah, it can pull off some interesting maneuvers and stuff. It's kind of a duelist's hilt, but to a certain degree, wouldn't that kind of lose a bit of, you know, leverage and the ability to bring your strength to bear?
Well, we know that that curved hilts are, or at least as they've been portrayed in the films, have been used mainly by Makashi specialists, Count Dooku being the first one to come to mind. Of course, there are others. But we also know that the Makashi form is generally weaker against kinetic-based or strength-based styles. So I don't know if it would actually make it difficult or more difficult than a straight-hilted lightsaber to bring your power to bear. But based on, you know, looking at Makashi and Dooku and what we've known about those type of fighters, the duelist type of fighters, I could see why it might, or why you could draw that conclusion.
And from the choreography in episodes 2 and 3 with the actors fighting the way they are, it almost kind of seems like that would be the case just based off of the way that they fought, with Dooku, you know, curling his hilt around in order to produce unexpected angles and deflections at the right possible moment. The others didn't have anything nearly like that.
Right, and of course Dooku was quite literally, I believe, based on the novelization, you've read it obviously, overpowered by Anakin's Form 5, which is more of a strength-based form. So, yeah. So I could see why you come to that conclusion.
Right.
Yeah.
Episode 3, Dooku was defeated simply because Anakin grabbed him, kept him in one place, and I mean, I don't know if you want to call that lame choreography or something, but
yeah, it looked cool to me when I was watching it as a kid.
I noticed you haven't said anything about the time you rewatched it recently. I caught what you did.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so yeah, so you're looking at a straight hilt then?
Yeah.
What about the color and the form?
I was thinking a more the color green, similar to Luke's lightsaber. His green is a little bit different, and I read it's because of synthetic crystals or something like that.
Okay.
But I always actually liked the look of that green lightsaber. It just always resonated with me in a particular way. Mm-hmm. According to legends, it's associated with peace, harmony, Jedi who focus on meditation and inner peace, as opposed to protection and several other different things that people have listed, aggression, kind of being on the borderline of Sith with purple lightsaber. But I also
kind of introspective, meditative. That sounds kind of like you. Yeah.
I could see myself being that sort of Jedi. Mm-hmm. It sounds very appealing to me if I think about the different roles that the Jedi seem to have, both in the films and from what I've read.
Right. Okay. And then the form?
Form 6. Niman?
Yeah, well, people pronounce it differently. I say Niman.
It's the jack of all trades. It's not necessarily the strongest in anything, but the balance of that form between the various forms that it takes from, because it takes from all of the previous forms, that was appealing to me in a sense. I'm not quite sure why, but I like the idea of being well-rounded. Mm-hmm. It apparently requires creativity for you to use it best, but I don't know if you know this about me, but I'm sort of a tinkerer. If I'm given something with the ability to be personalized, I'll just experiment with it all over the place until I find something that I really, really like and then stick with that. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to be the best swordsman, and I know I'm not going to be the best swordsman, but I do like experimenting, and experimenting with lightsaber forms actually does sound like fun to me.
Okay. All right. Well, based off of that selection, I do want to throw in a follow-up question. If you had a secondary or supplemental form to Nyman, what would you choose? You need a bit of time to think on it?
I just need time to remember names. I'm not good with names. I believe it's Form 5.
So?
Yeah, Jump So. Taking from Sarisu, but putting a little bit of offense in it. Having a little bit of both sides in order to, compensate for Sarisu's lack of being able to finish a fight quickly and whatnot.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. All right.
I'm not quite done yet.
Oh, okay. All right.
It also is called the Diplomat's form, Niman. Mm-hmm. And if I had to have a role in the order, Diplomat actually sounds like a pretty good way to contribute to protecting peace and justice across the galaxy.
Interesting. I wouldn't have thought that for you.
Well, it also plays into me being able to argue with people over
small
details.
Yes, you do that quite often.
Rules lawyering my way to victory.
Okay, with that perspective, I can see exactly why you go that route. Okay, we might have to get some B-roll footage as I'm kind of going over this, because I actually have the lightsaber in question in the car right now, but in a library you probably shouldn't be bringing weapons into the building, so
right.
So as far as my hilt, I actually after experimenting with a lot of lightsabers, both when we've just been sparring with each other and in other areas, I've really come to love the Gladius hilt from the Star Wars The Old Republic and the Mo game. That's the one that the Jedi Knight storyline uses. So that would actually be my hilt, mainly because it's very simplistic in design, similar to like a Qui-Gon Jinn's, where you can really picture yourself using it with one hand, using it with two hands. You can kind of switch where you're positioning your hand along the hilt and whatnot. So it's very, very functional in that sense. And I do like the aesthetics of the design, but that's not the main reason why I chose it.
Right.
So I would use the Gladius hilts, just a simple, single, standard lightsaber. And as far as my lightsaber color, I actually think I would be a purple, mainly because my fighting style, and obviously you've never seen this when we've been kind of sparring with each other and just trying to figure stuff out for our own things, but if I were actually legitimately in a fight, I do think I would be kind of hovering between the light and dark, because I would probably be expelled from the Jedi Order so many times. If I were fighting, say, a Sith Lord, and I got the chance to close the deal, that Sith Lord is losing his head. There is no diplomatic solution. There is only aggressive negotiations. So, yeah, I think I would be purple simply because my fighting style would probably employ quite a bit more dark moves than would be acceptable under the Jedi.
The point of a fight is to win!
Exactly. I was actually taking some quizzes online to see, if what I thought my form would be actually matched with what other people suggest my form to be.
Right.
And that was actually one of the questions, is like, when you're in a fight, what is the most important thing? And there was like 6 different options, and one of them was just to win. And I'm like, yeah, you're in a fight to the death. I'd say the most important thing is to win. That is the only way you survive. So, but moving on to the forum, based off of what I thought and what the quizzes actually suggested, I am also 9-man. Interestingly. And it's mainly because, again, coming back to my fighting style, I love the idea of not just being purely a swordsman, but also chaining together force abilities in my movesets. And that was something that 9-man was supposed to be pretty good at, the force chaining. And as you've already noticed, I'm sure, based on our sparring matches, I do oftentimes bring in some sort of magical element to the fight. So,
Right.
Yeah, so I think that really fits. It's also a gateway to Jarkai dual blade fencing as well, which I could also see myself possibly going down.
It doesn't really appeal to me as much.
No. Yeah, but... So, yeah, 9-man, and when I got to that, I'm like, okay, that's kind of combining a lot of the different forms, so that doesn't really give the viewers a whole lot of perspective on what kind of thing I would be looking at, so that's why I asked you about the supplemental form. And my supplemental form would be Sarisu, hands down, because I have the force chaining and whatnot along with moves from various other forms with 9-man, to get the offense that I need. And I can use the force chaining for counterattacks and whatnot. What I need is an impenetrable defense. And according to the lore, there has never been a Sarisu master who has been felled by blade in battle. So I'm like, okay, so I can't be killed. I will eventually find an opening and win.
Right.
So yeah, I would be 9-man with Sarisu as kind of a secondary.
I see.
Yeah.
Alright. I guess that would mean moving on to the final topic.
To characters. And we are kind of running long here. My goodness,
wow.
We are already at like 40-something minutes.
30 minutes. But
plus the first take we did. Okay, so we're just going to go really quickly through this because we did not want this video to go on nearly this long.
Start with number 5, main characters.
I didn't put mine in any particular order, but yeah, if you did, then yes.
Okay. Qui-Gon, Obi-Wan, Anakin, specifically from Episode 3, and possibly from the Clone Wars television series.
Yeah, you haven't seen that yet. So.
But from what you've told me, they're kind of similar. Kylo Ren as number 2, and then Luke Skywalker, keeping in mind Episode 8 for number 1.
I think you might be mistaking what I've said during our planning stages for fixer-upper videos with Episode 3 with actual Episode 3. Because
No. I haven't seen a lot of actual legends and continuity material. I haven't read any of the actual canon books or played any of the actual canon games either. So I don't really have that big of a framework for characters and stuff overall. And when comparing some of these, like Anakin to like Han Solo and stuff, I surprisingly found myself liking Anakin more than Han Solo.
Interesting.
I think if I had to say who's the better character, obviously it's Han Solo, and I don't like Anakin in Episode 1 or 2, and I'm not thinking of Darth Vader when I'm thinking of Anakin in Episode 3.
Right, yeah, they are pretty split. They're very different.
Okay, so sorry about this cut here.
We're running out of internal memory and time, so we are going to have to really speed things up here. The library closes in a few minutes.
Alright, to finish up the thought, yeah, Anakin.
part of me really empathizes with the guy in episode 3. You know, he's having issues, he's seeing visions. He doesn't really feel like the Jedi Order is working out very well, and Palpatine keeps saying, "Hey, here's another way," and I just kind of empathize with him at that point.
Okay.
Even if I don't think his actions afterwards were very great.
Yeah. Who among us does? So, going on to my 5 main characters, at least as of right now, because I'm still working my way through a lot of EU stuff. I have, to really quickly go over it, because again, pressed for time, Reven, Obi-Wan, Vader, Luke, and Galen Merrick, or Starkiller from the Force Unleashed video games. In no particular order, I didn't actually rank these. So, yeah, I mean, Reven, mainly because I was just going through his story in Knights of the Old Republic, and then, you know, the early stuff in the Old Republic MMO was just really, really cool, I thought, and I think his character is just really awesome, the way that he goes from Reven to Darth Reven to not Darth Reven to... I'm being specifically vague for your sake, because you're probably going to be playing these games, so I don't want to ruin it for you, but yeah, anyone who has played those games and knows Reven knows what I'm talking about. That's why he's in my top 5. Obi-Wan, I don't think that needs to be explained. Vader, I don't think that needs to be explained. Luke, we've already kind of talked about the differences in impact from his story and whatnot and how well he was executed, so that's already basically been explained. And Galen Merrick, I am working my way through The Force Unleashed right now and have really been enjoying it so far, so he's in my top 5 until further notice, but I haven't actually completed the story.
All right. As for top 5 minor characters or side characters, Ellen Salsabagno, also known as Ellen Sleazebagno. It's the guy who tried to sell death sticks.
He had to be in here.
He has to be in there. Of course, he's only at number 5, but still.
Yeah. Maybe if he went home and rethought his life, he would fall out.
Apparently, according to legends, he actually did rethink his life.
And he still makes it in the top 5.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
He has to be there for making the prequels not such a desolate place.
Yeah.
Okay. Then R2-D2 and C-3PO as a pair.
Okay.
Apart, they're not really that...
right, but they're...
But together they have a nice dynamic.
Yeah, the dynamic.
Then Jabba, I kind of liked his criminal gang of cutthroats. It was just kind of... What was the word I was thinking of? It was... no, I lost it. But he provides an interesting criminal feel to certain things. Mm-hmm. That the Empire doesn't. The Empire is evil, but Jabba is just...
They're gangsters.
Yeah.
Right? So, yeah. It's a different feel.
Then number 2, K2SO, or Mr. Bones, or HK-47, from what I've seen of them.
HK-47.
Yeah. The guy who refers to people as meat bags. There is something just great about sociopathic heroes like that. Just something hilariously great.
Yeah.
And then, at number 1, the Emperor.
Okay. Yeah, I remember before we started recording you said you were trying to figure out if he was main or side, but yeah.
He's more of a side character, even if he is rather awesome.
Yeah. I had a similar debate as to, can I really justify putting this character into the side character role, because she's kind of a main character, but in the end I said, forget it, side, because she deserves to be in the list one way or the other. So right. Ahsoka is probably my favorite side character of the bunch, not that I ranked all of these, but... so I have her mainly because the final arc in Clone Wars, which again I will be very vague on because you haven't seen it.
I do want to see that.
Yep, is probably one of my favorite arcs in all of Star Wars. It was just, I really, really thoroughly enjoyed it. Kreia, because she's just so darn unique in the Star Wars universe. I mean, again, I'm being vague because you haven't played the game.
Yep.
But really enjoyed her. Mara Jade, again, just because of the arc and how she went from Emperor's hand to Luke's wife. It was just a very, very great story and a very strong character. Lando, I don't think I really have to explain Lando. I mean, he's just so charismatic, and he's kind of that just that regular guy in the universe trying to get by and whatnot. And then, of course, his turn back to the light in 5 was very good. And just for the experience factor alone, Darth Tenebrous. He was such a minor character in the Plagueis novel. I mean, barely made it a chapter. But the Tenebrous Way, I really enjoyed the experience of reading that. He probably won't be in the top 5 for very long, but I loved the experience and the fact that he was so arrogant. That he not only felt like he could get glimpses of the future or whatnot, like a lot of Jedi can, he could calculate it. That was awesome. So,
and then the whole pride thing, and then getting rid of
and then
ability to see the future.
Yep, and then the ending, which if anyone has not read the Tenebrous Way, I will not spoil. It is on YouTube. You can look up for an audio version of it on YouTube. Just type in the Tenebrous Way.
I would recommend it.
Yeah, but it's an interesting experience, if nothing else. So yeah, that's my 5 side characters: Ahsoka, Kreia, Mara Jade, Lando, and for now, Tenebrous.
All right.
So, yeah, that'll wrap it up. We'll throw our schedule for the rest of Star Wars month up on the screen right now, so you can see what videos we are planning to do in the future for the rest of this month. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to like and subscribe and hit that bell next to our name so you'll be notified of all our future uploads, including all the ones that we'll be doing for Star Wars month. We're shooting for 2 a week right now as we're recording this.
Right.
So hopefully we'll be able to meet that, and you'll notice we don't have any Hollywood's Fixer-Uppers on the schedule for this month. That is mainly a time thing. We just couldn't get to it with Eric's schedule, with my schedule, outside of these videos. We couldn't get to it. We will be doing Fixer-Uppers for at least the prequels, and we've been trying to figure out if we can do them for some of the other movies as well. But we're still trying to figure out what to do there. So the prequels are coming, not this month, but they will be coming. And then we'll see what happens with future movies. We'll see if we can do something about that as well. So, yeah. But that'll do it for us today.
Yeah.
Thanks for watching, and have a great day.
Hey guys, this is Eric with a bit of a post-production update. Unfortunately, due to life things, Dan is going to be going on hiatus from this channel for a while. Possibly indefinitely. He's not, of course, going to be able to get to any of the videos that he's involved in. The Does It Hold Up videos scheduled for next week aren't going to happen. I will, of course, be getting to the videos I've been working on. Anyways, thanks for watching. Have a nice day.